Hello and welcome to this edition of ThePrint SoftCover. Today we're here for the launch of the book, The Maverick Effect, the inside story of India's IT revolution by Mr. Harish Mehta. The book is published by Harper Collins. The book outlines in great detail how the National Association of Software and Service Companies, or NASSCOM, was conceptualized and set up, and all the regulatory as well as mindset and perception hurdles that the association had to overcome in the late 80s, at a time when not many people truly understood how the Indian IT sector was shaping up and the prospects that it had. Mr. Mehta, the author of the book, joins us here today to talk about what he has penned down. He is the founding member and the first elected chairperson of NASSCOM. Mr. Mehta, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you're well. For the benefit of our viewers who have not read the book, could you start off with telling us why you wanted to write about the story of NASSCOM and what you wanted to convey through this detailed book?
See, I have been involved, you just said from the beginning, the birth of NASSCOM. And that was about 35 years ago. Now, if you compare the scenario 35 years back and where we are today, that time India was known as a snake charmer's country, fakir's country, bullock cart country. And today India has emerged as a tech powerhouse. If you look at we didn't have money to even pay for oil in 35 years back. And India was literally bankrupt on foreign exchange. Today we can import not only oil, we can import smartphones and many other necessary, you can say, capital equipment required for the country. But substantially, I would say, thanks to the earnings of the software industry, which earns today $200 billion, which is more than today what Saudi Arabia earns. The difference is Saudi Arabia money goes in one account versus in India goes into millions of accounts. Plus our population 1.3 billion versus Saudi's population of 3 crore or something. So it's a big gap, but earnings are now more than that. But we are not seeing that big impact across the country yet. If you look at the cultural transformation that our industry has brought in, whether it is corporate standards which have been brought into the stock market, or the transparency of financial reporting, or even simple things like meritocracy. We know so many people, gardeners, plumbers, drivers, their son joining IT industry. Now they're able to do that partly because now they don't have to know whom they know. Their children have to be good, take, let's say, computer as a career path, appear for the test of the company. If they do well, they get the job. So that sort of meritocracy was brought in by our industry. Today, our industry employs 5 million engineers, high disposable income, and 37% are women. Just imagine 1.3 million high disposable income earning women in the country. Now, what revolution they are going to bring in their home and then change India. We haven't seen those results yet. It will take 5 to 7 years before we start sensing what it means. So when you see all these different benefits, but when you ask policymakers, bureaucrats, RBI governors, I'm going back 3-4 years, no one was giving credit to IT industry. And I said, how come? Why there's a big gap between what we have done versus what the perception is? So I checked around a number of things, and it was brewing in my mind because I have seen NASSCOM's growth. I have seen how NASSCOM influenced IT industry and how IT industry influenced India's change. And I'm neither an author nor a historian. But then I took up the responsibility of writing it. I said, it has to be done. The story has to be told, how the fortunes of billion people change. So that was the reason how you can say, I emerged as a so-called first-time author.
All right. So in that context, before NASSCOM was set up, can you tell us a little bit about what the IT industry was at the time, like in India, what the perception about IT was in the late 80s? You had mentioned a couple of anecdotes in your book, say things like officials stapling paper to floppy disks, rendering them unreadable. You had also talked about realizing how India had the potential for software services instead of just software products. So can you tell us what it was like in the late 80s and then what you aim to change?
See, when I myself was a database manager at company, American can in USA. Now I had come back and I knew that sitting in cubicle of what in Sanford, Connecticut, versus what I can do sitting in a cubicle in Mumbai, I can do the same work. All I needed was a communication pipe to have access to those computers. So no pipe available. And the salary difference between what I was earning in India and what one earns in USA, that time was 15 times gap. So the labor arbitrage benefit was very clear. And there was a shortage of professionals in USA. So there's a good demand for software services from that perspective. I'm a computer science engineer. So when I came back and started becoming a partner with a company called Hinditron, in few years, I said, let's get into the product game because the product game gives the highest return in terms of your investment. And so we invested substantial money, put a team in Mysore, spent big money, 2-3 years, with best to best engineers we recruited from India, from IIT Bombay, IIT Madras, and whatnot. And I realized a series of challenges the product business has in the country, apart from piracy. And piracy is one of our major challenge in terms of we believe in copyright and not, we believe in right to copy and not in copyright. So if you look like a movie industry, the music industry, they were suffering badly. And I couldn't see the software product industry also will have the same fate if the piracy is not controlled. But that was not the issue at that point in time. There were other issues which were there. Things like the bureaucracy had a lot of prejudices against the business people. They wouldn't trust the business person. They still believe that business people are like what happened in Britishers. They allowed Britishers to come to India. We'll do some other such stuff and do things which are completely, you can say, anti-national. Whether it is corruption or bribery, that's another side. But making money, they'll break any rules and whatnot. So there was a major distrust between businessmen and the bureaucracy. Now, if you look at further, what is software? Nobody knew what is software. You just talked about software product and software services. In those days, hardware was the sunrise industry. Not software services was not even in the radar.
Blue chip.
Yeah. And the software product was something which everybody was saying, why not India be in the software product game? And there were 30, 40 of us who believed the potential is in software services. Now, by being in that business for 7-8 years, we had something like identified 125 regulations strangulating the software services industry. And then people didn't understand, the bureaucrats, what is software product. It's intangible. It didn't have an identity. To them, it was more like a product to be kept in a cupboard. So like once I went for, there was this excise duty in those days on software project or software development. So I argued with the excise officer. I said, how can you have excise duty? It's for a product, not for services. He was very upset the way we were arguing passionately. He said, young man, don't argue with me whether I can charge for excise or not. You want zero duty on excise, I'll give you zero duty. But don't challenge me on that. So he removed the excise duty because it was just totally illogical to have it on a software services. When you want to export software, in those days, we used floppy as a media because there was no pipe available, communication pipe to send your data or your programs. And so you have to send it through a floppy drive. Many of you may not even seen the floppy drive today's generation. But it was very simple, like a long play tech record, whatever you call it, where you store data and courier it to
the same button that we see today in all our menus.
That's right. So we used to have the floppy. So we go to customs officer saying, I want to send this floppy to USA. The customs officer will look at the floppy and he says, okay, what is in it? We say software. So they give me a sample. Now, what do I give him? 1,000 pages of code which is written on the floppy. So I would explain to him, you print few pages, give it to him. He'll take the floppy, and the first thing he'll do is staple it with your file. So even the entire evidence is lost.
Yeah.
Even the government had, when you import software on a floppy, let's say the product, this is the software product is priced $10,000. The floppy is priced, the floppy's weight is 1 kilo, half a kg. And there's a duty of 65%. You will pay duty on what? You will pay duty on the weight of the floppy. had nothing to do with the software value on it. So that was the kind of environment where nobody understood different definitions by different government departments, from Home Ministry to External Affairs to Finance Ministry, Income Tax Department, Reserve Bank. Nobody understood what software is. And beyond above that, software services, outsourcing, for example, had no idea the concept of what is outsourcing. As a you can say innovation done by our industry of work which you can do it remotely using the pipeline, but that came much later. So with that kind of environment where bureaucracy has a lot of prejudices against business and it didn't understand software, and we had hundreds of regulations regulating it. So that was the sort of environment before we formed NASSCOM.
Right. So after NASSCOM was formed, what did NASSCOM do differently as compared to any other efforts to overcome these kind of hurdles? And how did you think that contributed to raising the value of Indian IT industry? You had another anecdote about someone saying that we have Izzat now as an IT person. So how did NASSCOM help bring that up around?
See, when we started NASSCOM, there were 30, 40 of us in the country who were doing software services business. So when we decided to form NASSCOM, it's very typical engineers' work. So we looked at the constitution of CII, FICCI, Indian Merchants Chamber in Mumbai, then Lions, Rotary, various other associations. We put all together and we started debating the pros and cons of each of these institute. So why is it? Why, like in Lions, it's a ladder system where you just get promoted position-wise every year. Or in IMC run by trustee base, or in CII run by seniors, and so on and so forth. So we said, and many of us are active in those associations in different capacities. So we understood the pros and cons of each of that to some extent. So when we sat down, we said, what do we want? Now, ours is a technology-driven industry. We all knew that technology will keep changing. Even my company's name is Onward, for example. Because I didn't want to associate with a particular technology or information because we didn't know. I didn't know at that time. I said Onward name would survive, but may not. Whatever name I put, I had to go through a change in it. Simple thing like that. So we knew that technology will continuously change. So now what do we do? So we took a couple of decisions. If technology is changing, you have to then focus on the ecosystem, not just lobbying. All other associations are on, you can say, 100% focused on lobbying with the government. We said, no, we need to look at the supply side very aggressively because changing technology means changing curriculum, retraining, reskilling, all that has to be part. Who will do it? Either government does it or we do it. Now, for whatever reason, we said this, we cannot, and again, knowing the bureaucracy, whatever we knew, we said, no, it has to be done by the industry. So then NASSCOM will focus on the ecosystem. On lobbying would be the primary thing in the beginning, but later on it will become the ecosystem part. The second thing we decided is we will strengthen our secretariat. We are all honorary, we'll put some work, but we are not dedicated to that extent because our business is to run our. So we said, okay, let's strengthen the secretariat. So we budgeted substantial money for secretariat. The third thing was we saw in other associations, they were run or ruled by a few companies, large companies or few powerful individuals, icons and whatnot. They were not heard by the entire, industry so-called. So we decided, okay, we must have a single voice. Now, single voice meaning we must represent 80% of the top line of the industry. And that single view would be a composite view by consensus driven, not just that some powerful individual would drive it. So, and then we had to go through a lot of struggle. For example, TCS in the beginning, they had Tata Group had 70% of the industry top line. And they were not in the beginning ready to join NASSCOM. They felt there was a startup, let it come to a certain stage before we take interest in them. And so some of us are very clear, we need Mr. Kohli and the TCS to be, otherwise we don't start NASSCOM. Because otherwise there's no meaning. If you don't have the top line of, and Mr. Kohli agreed to be part of NASSCOM, and then we launched NASSCOM. In the hindsight, it was a smart decision. because that gave such a fantastic purpose, you can say, view to the government. A single voice, industry is saying it. It's not that one group is saying something and another group will go to media and then exploit it, create noise and so forth and get something done for their side. So that's how we started. And the first issue we tackled was the trust. So there was no trust amongst members of the association, and there was no trust with the government. Major issue, trust deficit between policymakers and us. So in our case, like in our meeting, nobody would talk, frankly. We were scared. Okay, I let out some secret, others will copy it. Or I talk about my problem, others will exploit it, and I lose my customer. So they were all scared to talk. So we used to then, okay, but how do we solve this part? Because if they don't contribute, there is no meaning. So we had one of our co-founder, Ramni, at his room, we would all meet a day before, and over drinks, over food, or whatnot, we'll spend hours and hours debating just different subjects, not really industry, but that allowed, so hope was that they'll open up each other. So at that time, Dr. Prakash Hebalkar of Tata Unisys had called me, and he said, Harish, are you running a serious association or are you running a social organization?
Right.
I said, but Prakash, they are not opening up in the meeting. We need to find a way for them to open up. And this was one way we knew that we can have them open up and discussion. So once that trust was built, the second thing we did was we allowed government bureaucrats from any department without invitation to attend our meetings. So they say, what? Because they always felt that we business people want to hide info. They don't want to expose them to our problems. So they were totally surprised that we can open offer. And so without invitation, we just walk into our meeting. And we explain why. Because unless you are with us, you understand our problems, we can't solve together. It
so
is
that's
not
transparency. Yeah,
so we built that trust between the policymakers and us. I think that was one of the major differentiators between us and probably other associations. So there are some reasons on which we started NASSCOM and how we built a strong foundation. Of course, then there were certain decisions we took, like we will not bribe anyone for any policy change. So we had the collective strength. Sometimes it took 5 years for a particular change to happen. But we were willing to wait. And we always found at some point the well-wisher of the industry would be in the bureaucracy who would come in and bring in that change. But once you build that trust, then it became very easy. But in the first 5-6 years, it was really difficult to gain that trust.
Understood. And I think the last thing I'd like to touch upon is the change in perception. You talked about building the brand India Inc. You said that the perception of what Indians were and what Indians in IT were needed to change. And so there was this sort of massive marketing exercise that was undertaken, including writing positive articles in newspaper, and you even had a fashion show. Can you tell us about how that worked and what the outcome of that was?
See, when we started, some of us were in the software services business, and we knew, and when you walk into say prospect's office, I mean, we had no foreign exchange. So they can make out from us our behavior of asking for lift or to pick us up. And can you imagine, instead of selling, you have to ask customer to prospect to pick you up, type of a thing. So we had series of such, you can say, challenges. And then when we meet they would laugh at us. You want to do the software development work sitting in India for us? I mean, it was just not in the radar because India brand was very poor. In those days, the Indian companies who exported products, they basically exported to get an import license from the government, not for export. And they would ship the product and the customer will end up dumping those products. Very poor brand for Indian as a brand. So we said, now how do we solve this issue? Because if we do not have a quality brand with the prospect, we will not even get the business. So we started thinking, we had no money either. So like we took a simple decision of saying, every one of us, we prepared first 5 slides, NASSCOM prepared it, selling India, from Aryabhattas to whatnot, and India's technical manpower and all. We put a nice 4 or 5 solid, you can say 10, 20 good arguments in favor of India, because all of us must speak the same language. So we had 40 companies and maybe 15,000 engineers working. Every engineer was also trained to speak that language. We sent these 5 slides to Indian ambassadors all over the world, saying, this is how you position India. So these are all small, we can say, frugal steps that we took to start building India Inc. brand. Ultimately, the brand is built on performance. So quality of work that we do has to be absolutely of world class for us to earn that respect. And of course, the complexity of projects that we take has to be delivered, and complexity has to again prove we have those skills to do it.
Right.
So for us, we found Carnegie Mellon came up with a standard called ACI, which for quality of project definitions. Now, if you're level 3, level 4, and level 5, what are the different standards? Level 5 tells you you're a world-class software delivery, project delivery organization. So at NASSCOM, we said anyone who employs more than 100 engineers would go for a SCI level certification. And we came up with various schemes to bring in that knowledge base through various workshops, master classes to train Indian engineers on SCI certification. In another 7 to 8 years, India had the largest number of quality certified companies. And if you follow that quality process, 99.9% you will deliver everything on time and as per the customer expectation.
Right.
And then, of course, we read a number of other small things we did to, like any foreigner who comes, let's say Eric Smith, he was my partner, Noel. When he came, we told him to say a few good things about India in public. These are all low-cost devices for us. So Bill Gates came, same thing. So any prime minister who comes to India will tell them because they want to say some good things about India when they're here. So we use that as a sort of a mechanism to pass on the message to the rest of the world. Okay, India is arriving in the software field, in the technology field. Right. At that time, in 1 year, I remember Aishwarya Rai and Susmita Sen won Miss 2 awards as a Miss World something. So that's how we said, well, at least we're world-class beauty.
Yeah.
Now, we may not care about who those companies were giving the awards, but at least branding-wise, it was saying world-class quality.
Right.
Sorry. So for that world-class quality, we said, let's have a fashion show.
Right.
Of course, it sounded frivolous and all kind of things, but we combined that with Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam as a philosophy.
Okay.
Because we could see one big challenge was the jobs in other countries worried about we taking away their jobs. So we say India has never attacked anywhere in the world. We believe in this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam philosophy. These are small ways of driving it. Or this, the branding of India. And that's how it built an Indian industry, started delivering performance. And of course, I talked before about corporate standards or transparency standards and all that were brought in. All these different pieces came together to build. So that's where you talked about the Ijat story comes in, where about 15 years back, I was traveling to to attend a TiCon in California. And then the taxi driver, I came out of San Jose airport, was a Sardarji, middle-aged Sardar. So then he asked me, where are you from? I said, I'm coming from Mumbai. So what do you do? I said, I'm from software industry. And suddenly he said, Aapne hame ijjat dilai hai. And I'm scratching my head. What have we done to bring pride to this middle-class Indian here in California? So I asked him, kaise humne aapko ijjat dilai? He says, now any American who travels by taxi, he thinks I'm a PhD student doing part-time taxi driving. He said, today the place where I live, my brand has gone up many notches. He said, I've seen in the last 15 years, after the Indian software industry has arrived, the branding, of course, the non-resident Indians also equally doing well in Silicon Valley. All pieces came together in that sense to bring brand for Indians.
Right. And the branding has been, in fact, it has been so successful that it's a stereotype now. Brainy Indians, smart IT Indians outside. Yeah. Thank you so much for such an engaging conversation, Mr. Mehta. This was informative and it was interesting. For all of our viewers who haven't read yet, Mr. Mehta's book is out right now. It's The Maverick Effect. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of SoftCover. And thank you, Mr. Mehta, for your time as well. My
pleasure. So look forward to all of you buying, reading, and commenting on the book. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.